So what do you think of the movie? Wasn't it special? Very special movie. Yeah. My name is Stacey Wilson-Hunt. I'm an entertainment journalist based here in Los Angeles, and I'm so honored to be here tonight to speak to the amazing talent behind this very special movie. So I will waste no time in bringing them out. First, please let me welcome to the stage Carey Mulligan. And Paul Dano. That's some very solid applause. I'm very impressed. And Zoe Kazan, please come to the stage. Thank you for being here. You all look lovely. They're fresh from the premiere, which is why they look so fancy. So thank you for making time. So I know each of you did not act in this movie, but this is a room full of actors. So I wanted to start with a couple more general questions about performing. And I wanted to know, what does each of you consider your big break as a performer? And that can be your first SAG job. That can be maybe a theater performance, something that really propelled you forward as an artist. I'll make Carey go first since you're sitting next to me. It makes it easy to have them do it.
You were hiding behind your hair. I was leaning forward really hard. I think probably actually the job where I met Zoe, The Seagull, in 2008. We did a production of The Seagull together on Broadway, and Zoe played Masha and I played Nina. We shared a dressing room, fell in love, and the rest is history.
So you felt like that job, even more so than the film work you had done, kind of pushed you, propelled you?
Yeah, I think I just sort of, I think I loved it so much, and it was one of my favorite jobs ever. And I think because I didn't train, I didn't get into drama school. I'd spent a couple of years of feeling sort of like an imposter, and it was this, I suppose the first time I sort of felt like I kind of vaguely knew what I was doing.
Well, when you can pull off that material too, it probably feels pretty good. And how about you, Paul?
Yeah, I think two come to mind. One, the first film I did, which was called LIE. I think I was 16. It was an independent film,
yeah.
and I don't think I think I wanted to be an actor, but I thought I meant being on stage. I live in New York, and I started doing theater there, and I just didn't know there was like a place for me in film. And doing LIE, somehow seeing a set where it was the filmmaker was so passionate, it was his story, and I think I probably had some idea that films were these just the giant Hollywood thing, and so something about that, and it exposed me to independent film, which I was not, didn't even really know about at that age, honestly. So LIE took me to all these festivals, and suddenly I was seeing films I never even knew existed, and started to get excited about film. And the other one is called The Ballad of Jack and Rose, and that was important because I got to play somebody who wasn't like myself or in my eyes, and I think somebody believing in me to do that made me feel like, because I think that's what I wanted in some ways, the ability to play different.
And how is that
types
character
of parts.
Different from how you see yourself?
Well, I don't know. I think he's kind of like cool and like punk rock and like, he's
cool,
kind of
Paul.
skeezy, and no, I'm just kind of like I think I was like a dorky guy who like, and so somebody who I liked believing in me, I was like, oh, okay, I think I can be an actor.
Wonderful. And how about you?
I would say like mine was like a little string of time, more than one job. Like between the fall of 2007 and the fall of 2008, I did 4 plays in a row. I did a new play at Playwrights Horizons, the play that Paul and I met on at the New Group. I did Come Back Little Sheba on Broadway, and I did The Seagull with Carey. And something about that little string, like, changed, I think, like the rooms that I could get into in terms of like casting directors and stuff like that, but also just like what Carey was saying, like I didn't go to drama school, and I learned on my feet doing like 4 very different roles in a row, and feeling like I don't know that I was capable of working very hard with like people who were adults. I didn't feel like an adult yet, and like learning how to carry myself into a rehearsal room.
Does theater feel like the gauntlet that if you survive it, it's sort of everything after that is not easy necessarily, but more doable?
I mean, we were talking about this today, Paul and I doing a Q&A for the Writers Guild, and we were just saying, like, you know, on stage you have to be your own editor. You're in charge of the narrative storytelling, and also you have this incredible opportunity to watch other actors work and like watch their process. So I don't know about like the gauntlet, or like if you can survive that, you can survive anything. Like films are really hard too, and television, like it's all, you know, they all have their own challenges. But I feel like we both feel like theater taught us an enormous amount about acting and how to be an actor.
Wonderful. So I recently rewatched one of my favorite movies from the last few years, Ruby Sparks, which you made together. It's very charming, very meaningful, and actually just very intense in a way that maybe the first time I watched it, it didn't sink in, and this time I was like, oh, maybe it's because I'm married now and it meant more to me. It's intense. But this movie, Wildlife, is similar in that it examines the fragility of love and intimacy. And I'm wondering, what was it about this book that inspired you to want to make it, and Paul to take on the extra task of directing?
Yeah, I mean, I've wanted to make a film for a long time, and just could never put pen to paper. I read this book called Wildlife by Richard Ford. I had a very sort of uncanny personal experience reading it. Right from the first paragraph, I was sort of just in love with the language, and then quickly with the characters, and kind of reminded me of my parents and my grandparents and myself, and this sort of feeling of like the mystery of who our parents are. I think there was some feeling of like a desire to understand these characters, to understand something in my own life. And I gave it to Zoe to read and said, what do you think? Could this be a movie? And we talked about it, and then daydreamed about it for quite some time, knowing that certain things in a book may not work on film. And finally, when I thought of the ending and the final scene and the final shot, that's when I sort of thought, oh, I think we can do this. And so that's when we really started.
And were the rights available? How did you go about acquiring those?
Yeah, I wrote to Richard Ford, and he wrote me back. Stuff of his has been optioned and not made, so I don't even know if he thought this was ever going to actually happen.
Right.
You know, I was very clear with my intentions, and he wrote back, and one of the things he said was, my book is my book, and your picture is your picture, and you should establish your own values and goals, and really beautiful sense of permission from somebody you admire. So that was really important. It's what we wanted, but to hear it, it almost helps you like skip a step.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And tell me, I'm always amazed at how people co-write a piece, especially an adaptation. Just take me to that first day when you knew you were doing it. What was your very first step?
Well, the first step was Zoe like tearing apart my first draft.
So you did a first draft.
She was not yet a writer on the project.
I wasn't.
No, she wasn't. I wrote a first draft, which we're sort of getting to the bottom of what really happened there.
Right. So I thought about it today.
By being asked about it a lot.
I thought about it today. And what I thought was, like, Paul originally had been like, we'll hire a writer to write this. And then he started like getting images, and he started the process of adaptation in his mind. And what I remembered today was that you had said sort of like, I think I'll take a stab at it, like almost just like to get my directing feet underneath me. Like I think when you first started out writing it, it was sort of like, I'll start exploring this. And then as you wrote, it became more of a real draft. And then by the time you gave it to me, I think you really thought it was a real draft.
Until you told him it wasn't.
Well, it didn't look like a screenplay.
I mean, it wasn't in screenplay
Right.
format.
Were you working in Final Draft or just in Word?
No, just in Word.
Okay, you were just in Word. So it was kind of like you were blocking it out for yourself visually.
Yes.
We'll just pretend we'll pretend that was the case. You were just blocking it out.
I think I was. And I think, yeah. No.
But the whole Final Draft thing, it's a different universe working in Final Draft. It feels more official. Yeah.
We rely on each other so much creatively. And like I give Paul my, like on Ruby Sparks, I gave him the first 5 pages before I had written anything else, and was like, what do you think? You know, like we do that a lot. And usually what we say is, it's good, keep going. And this just like didn't look like a screenplay. And so I had a lot of notes, and it wasn't like that healthy for our relationship. Like we got an hour in, and I think I was sort of like, sometimes like later in the writing process, I would say to Paul, like we'd be talking about something, I'd be trying to explain to him what I wanted, and I would just say like, oh, I'll just do it and show you, and that would be easier than explaining it. And I think that was sort of my impulse, like, oh, just let me fix it, and then then you'll see what I mean. But then that was the most contention we ever had writing it, and we worked together on it for like 3 or 4 years. Like it was really like one of us would work on the draft and then would go away to go take an acting job, and the other person would like pick up where they left off. And you know,
low stakes, we optioned ourselves. We didn't have anybody to answer to, and we wanted to just kind of cultivate it on its own time. And time was a friend, so there was no. We were not working on.
You
it
didn't have
for
the
like
studio
4
breathing down
years
your
every
neck for
day.
rewrites.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and Paul always points out we didn't have to pay our rent writing this, and it allowed us to spend a lot of time developing it, even though we were just developing it between the two of us and like the few people that we gave it to for notes.
And how do you think the fact that you're both actors informed not only the process, but the actual content of the script? Whether it's in maybe in the way you wrote scene directions or the format? I
mean, I certainly, I think that acting has taught me how to interpret something. So I think, you know, you're putting yourself through a character. And something, you're giving a piece of yourself, even though it's dressed up in something, and maybe adaptation is similar. Like, you know, you're putting yourself through this thing, and so, you know, when we work on a scene or an act in a play, like the questions you learn to ask and the way you sort of, you know, work with the material, I think was instrumental in sort of working with the book.
Maybe anticipating the types of questions an actor might have when he or she reads a script, sort of trying to preempt those.
Well, no, I think just asking those. You know, not thinking, what's Carey Mulligan going to ask when she reads this? You know, no, I mean thinking about for the character.
And Carey, what appealed to you about this character? She is not easy and very complicated, which I'm sure is what appealed to you. You tend to gravitate to very complicated people. Did something specific speak to you about who she is?
There are kind of a couple of things. I suppose, yeah, it was that she was not straightforward. It sort of felt like a really kind of exciting crossword or something, you know. That of any script I've read, this felt like the most well-written, full-rounded character. And I think
huge
that
compliment
is,
to your writers.
They know this.
That's amazing.
But you know, and it's not. This is not the only time, but oftentimes I've read a script and I read the female part. I mean, 90% of the time you read the female part and think, no one's thought about this at all. But in the times when they have, oftentimes you think, well, this is a really good start. And I reckon if I work with someone, you know, we can figure out who she is and we can make her more interesting, or like maybe we can give her this, or maybe she can have a funny walk, or, you know, you know, just sort of
any more layers
anything.
To her. Right.
But with this, that wasn't necessary because she was just all there. But she also still felt like a really interesting sort of puzzle to figure out. But I felt like they had written her story and understood her story so well. It was all layered in there in the script. It was just about kind of figuring it out with them when it came to the performance.
And in terms of who the protagonist is in this story, I think it's confusing at times because sometimes it's Joe and sometimes it's your character. From a writing perspective, whose story is this, do you think?
Well, it is. I think the point of view of the kid is instrumental to the experience, the emotional experience of the film. sort of the access to the parents or lack thereof and the way that information is revealed. But I do feel like it is a family portrait, and I do feel like it's a coming of age film for a family. So I think it's for a mom.
Which is why the final
dad,
scene is so
and kid.
resonant for that very reason, the
Yeah.
portrait piece of it.
And that's something that I think we had more scenes of Jerry and Jeanette solo in earlier drafts to get to know them almost, and then kind of brought it back a bit, feeling like the power is in, we need just enough to get behind Jeanette, or to see her survival instincts, or to see that she's been a good mom for 14 years before and been a good wife, and you need just enough. And same with Jerry with his work stuff, but then it's about this kid seeing his parents change and their marriage break. Yeah.
And what were some scenes that you did lose that you felt we have this covered, or this is redundant, that you can think of offhand that you thought, oh, this is a great scene, but we just don't need it?
Well, some of that happened in the editing room, and it like speaks to the power of the actor. Actually, like we got our script down to the leanest, what we thought was the leanest possible form, because when you're making a movie at an independent film budget scale, like you're trying to make as few scenes as possible, as few like company moves as possible. So we thought every scene is doing as much work as it possibly can. And then we got into the editing room, and like the scene where Carey asks for, is writing the check at the school, for instance, like that scene spoke so strongly, like her body language, what she does in that scene made other scenes of her on her own redundant. And the same thing with Jake, like they brought so much history in themselves. There was so much information in what they were doing that like you just didn't need the dialogue in another scene.
That's great. But it was nice to have those options when you did sit down to edit, and then you had the option to just not use them.
Yeah, and I think those, I think that happens in every film, and I think it's okay that it does, because also the actors might have needed those scenes. And Walter Murch says something great in his book, I think it's in The Blink of an Eye, where like if you're holding on to something, like one way to look at it when you let go of it, it's like a bridge that helped to get you where you are now, and you don't need it anymore. And I feel like there's scenes definitely as an actor I've been in that have been cut, but maybe I got a piece of information from them I needed, and it's a good thing we did them.
And that's the grown-up response to seeing your scenes cut, right? After.
Sure.
When you see your big moment cut and you say, I learned from that, right? You guys all feel that way, right? So I went back, and I have actually not read Wildlife, but now I want to. And I went back and found the New York Times review of the book from 1990, and I was wondering what you thought of this person's appraisal of the story. Quote, "But is it really the nature of things for Joe's father to abandon his mother, and for her to lack the understanding not to inflict her frustration on her child? Is her doing so just a coincidence, a mere specimen of wildlife? If it is, then it's not a very interesting one, because there are too many people in the world who are civilized enough to surmount such circumstances." Which is kind of harsh.
Did a dude write that?
Yes,
Shocking.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was he a woman in 1960?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many things to say about that. But I do, in a sense, understand, and again, I haven't read the book, but I understand maybe what this writer is trying to say is, are we supposed to empathize, I guess, with their situation? And it doesn't make sense that she would leave when she's had this coming of age moment. And how did you maybe fill in those moments to give us the material to empathize? Because I empathize with everyone in the story.
Yeah, I mean, that's one interpretation. I will say my experience of reading the book was not that at all. And
Critics are problematic.
I mean, I feel in no way, shape, or form was I interested in condemning these parents. I felt I understood their struggle. I liked how human they were, and I thought that it was appropriate and interesting to try to sort of be warts and all about it. And what else? Yeah, I don't know. I hope that there's love in the film and compassion, even though there's a lot of like struggle and pain and heartbreak. And I don't think you have one without the other. And I think that's why family is so powerful and interesting. It is some of the greatest love in our life. And I think it's sometimes the source of some of the greatest struggle in our life. And I'm constantly amazed that families do survive things, even if a marriage breaks or you're still like my parents are still my parents. Like it's crazy. Like family it's profound. So I don't I don't get that from the book.
I was just curious what your take on it was, because it seemed very harsh to me when I read it. And do you recall a very tough day or tough scene during your production experience that you look back on and you think, oh my God, I cannot believe we got through that despite the obstacles thrown in our way?
Yes.
There had to be at least one.
Oh, there were so many. I mean, I'll tell the quick technical one, which is our day 3. We did the drive to the fire sequence where Jeanette and Joe drive out to the fire. And
day 3. That's pretty early.
Yeah, and we only had 4 days in Montana. The rest was in Oklahoma. We just couldn't afford to be in Montana. And we kind of planned that day like literally with maps and toy cars, and it was like going into battle. And because we really had kids hours, 5.5 hours on camera, and he's in like every scene. And so our first idea was like, you should find a car that there's 2 of them available so we can rig one while you're using the other, because it's going to take 30 to 45 minutes to make a safe car rig, and you can cut that time out. So we did that. And so we chose a car that there was 2 of. And they showed up with the windshields cracked out and huge issues. And we were just fucked, and suddenly you're trying to figure out how, and you have 1 day to do a very important sequence that should be really fun, not fun, but it should be a fun thing to shoot.
Scene, yeah.
And it worked, and in the end I think it's great, and I wouldn't change a thing, but we also had days where the scene where Jerry comes home, that is like a 5 to 6 minute scene. So it was the whole day was dedicated to that, and all in one room, and that was just a lot.
And how long was the total shoot? How many days did you guys shoot?
28 days, maybe.
Okay. And what were the most clever ways that you saved money on this production?
Wait, was there anything you were thinking that was like that was just a terrible
memory for you?
No, I was
thinking of that, Jake. It wasn't a terrible memory,
no,
but
yeah.
it was just that scene.
That scene was really hard.
We did Jake's coverage first, and then we did mine, and then he decided he didn't want to be where he was or something. It just changed a lot. And then we had to do mine again, and then we did his again, and it just went...
Yes. I mean, you give the actors freedom, and they...
It's a problem when they're all so good, too. That's the other issue. What were the clever ways that you saved money on this production? Looking back, when you thought, well, we weren't in the lap of luxury during our stay, but saving that money was worth it in the end.
I want to shout out to our production designer, Akeen McKenzie, because Akeen saved us so much money. He was very crafty, and like Paul and Diego,
and Amanda for our costume designer, because we had to be. So
finding, going to Goodwill and that actually
only
finding
dressing the corner of the room that you're going to be shooting.
Okay.
Yeah, except the Brinson house, we really kind of, because we were shooting there so much, we put a lot of work into that. But a lot of other stuff, we had to be really well prepared. We were pretty well prepared with how we were going to shoot it, which I think helps sort of know where you should put your money. So many things, though. I mean, they're so technical. There were so many budget meetings and schedule meetings. And you have to be crafty. We also, our cinematographer is more like working with what's available there and then supplementing it. So a lot of it was how do we shoot via the time of day, but still get our day done, and work with the sun.
What time of year was this? I couldn't tell
fall.
It was fall. Okay.
It was fall.
Yeah, very pretty.
Late fall, actually, and that's part
so
of
your days
also
were
why
short.
we shot in Oklahoma. They were, but the kids' hours were short. So I don't think we ever had 14-hour days on the film, or if there was 1 or 2 maybe, but it was more like a 12-hour thing because Ed was gone by then, and probably we'd try to do something with Carey before or after.
Right. Wow. And Carey, I'd love to know what wildlife means to you. What does the title of this movie mean to you? Because I'm still thinking about it and I can't fully figure it out, but I like it.
What the title of the film means to me? Oh, geez. I think you asked me that in rehearsal. We wrote about. Do you remember in rehearsal we talked about that?
Probably, yeah.
I wrote it down somewhere.
Yeah.
I could probably dig it out.
You can change your answer because we don't know what you said originally.
My original might have been better. I don't know. I can't give you a decent answer, probably. I mean, I don't know if I should be more reflective, but I don't generally. That's why it was an interesting exercise when we talked about this in rehearsal, because it made me think a bit, but I don't generally tend to think massively about things like that when I go into work, nor when I come out of them. So I could give you some bollocks answer, but I'd be making something up. I don't know. Zoe,
Okay.
you've probably got something decent to say.
My mom asked me that today, and I was like, I don't know.
It's a great way to market
It's
a movie. We don't
great
have no idea what this title
guys.
means.
Neither of you have thought about this?
Literally every single person thinks that it's wildfire, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Well, what does Jake's character mean when he says, you know, in that moment of exasperation, you know, what a wild life this is, or whatever the exact line is? What does he mean by that?
Well, I don't think that's what it's about. I think that line is there, and we didn't play it on his face. We played it over Joe, you know, for a reason, because it would just be
A little bit too on the nose. Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I feel like the title, I think it's in the opening shot, the title being Over the House. I don't know what that means, but it just feels...
I think it's the burning up thing. I do have an idea of why he called it that. I just don't think it's a very you know, there's the scene where they're driving out to the fire and Joe asks what happens to the animals, and she says some of them burn up and some of them adapt, and I think that that's what it's about. But
I think it's about the uncontrollable, though, too, you know, and that a spark can suddenly, you know, one day your life is, you know, and I don't know.
Now I feel like an idiot.
A lot to unpack in this title.
No, this is the most mystery I've ever seen around a movie title. It's great. It leaves it very open for interpretation.
well, we didn't choose it.
I know.
But we chose to keep it.
You're right. No,
It's
you're
true.
absolutely right.
It's got a really cool French name. What was the French name they gave it?
You thought that was cool? I think it was called like A Burning Season or something. Oh, you loved it. Okay,
That
great.
works too.
Wildlife is way better. Wildlife's way better.
And finally, before we get to audience questions, how did this project test you as an artist in ways that you hadn't been tested before? And obviously, Paul, your experience was unique in the sense you weren't acting, but how about you, Carey? How did this challenge you in ways you hadn't been?
On screen, probably I haven't had as difficult a job to do before, really. So I think there are roles that I felt had similar complexity that I played on stage, but never on screen. I think a lot of the challenge for me in this was sort of letting go a bit and not being nervous. I can get quite nervous. I can get quite kind of, and then I pull back from making sort of interesting choices because I sort of take the easy road. But that was part of the joy of working on this, is that Paul was so good at kind of encouraging me not to be timid. So I think it was that, probably just sort of relaxing and like letting go a bit.
Well, that speaks highly of him as a director too. No, congratulations. And beyond the obvious challenges of directing for the first time, how do you think you've grown now as a storyteller, Paul?
Well, I learned so much, and really every step of the way, and probably every day. So I can't wait to do it again, and hope that I'll have like just a hair more confidence, a hair less breakdowns. You know, just like the whole, just a little less high-low. You know, now that I have the experience of the first one, I feel like real respect for like the collaboration with everybody, with the actors, and sort of seeing, even though I've been an actor, that they're the lifeblood of the film and they're your conduit to the audience as well, in a way, aside from what you're doing with the camera, but the crew and how much work is going into it, and just sort of, you know, acting is more lonely, I think, and directing is like more like playing in a band or something.
You also have to show up on set that first day and have the confidence to have everyone feel confidence in you. And I've heard that time and time again. That's the like, holy shit, all these people are here for me. Did you feel like that when you got to set?
Yeah. I mean, when you see the trucks, you know, and
the trucks make everything official.
Yeah, yeah. And also, it's time. It's like, you know, suddenly you're there, and you've dreamed it, and you've also had to hustle for it and pitch it, and you know, and bring together a bunch of people, and you know, you're kind of responsible for that in a way, and so it is scary, but I think it's such a fun thing to do.
And Zoe, you were a producer as well, so you got to see, you know, you were the omniscient eye and the writer. How has this changed you as an artist?
Well, I mean, just getting to be in the passenger seat for the directing process taught me an enormous amount. Being in the editing room with Paul was a huge learning experience, especially as an actor. I have to say, if you have a friend making a movie, like, go spend some days in the editing room. It taught me so much. I mean, watching Carey's performance, but just the process of putting together the narrative of the film. And then also, honestly, I couldn't be on set in the when we got into production. We had been like trying to make this happen for like 4 years. We had been writing it in 3.5 years, something like that.
We've been writing it, but we tried to make it happen that year.
Yes, but we had been like in process with it for 3 or 4 years at that point. And I have had like plays produced, and I'd had this other screenplay produced with Ruby Sparks, and it's really hard for me to let go. Like I think because my metabolism as an actor is like to step up just when you're supposed to step back as a writer. And so it was like what Carey was saying about letting go. I actually feel like it was also my lesson, but in a different way. Of like, I was in a play in New York, I couldn't be on set, and just like letting it go to these beautiful people that I love so much, and knowing that it would be fine and something new would come, and that was a really great gift.
Amazing experience. So Monique has a question. Where's Monique? She's somewhere. Oh, she's back. There she is.
How'd you know that?
This is a broader question about your careers. What is the most important lesson that you have learned as an actor over the course of your career? This is not an easy question.
Look, stepping to the other side of the table taught me that immediately, usually when someone comes in the room, if they're going to be not right for the part. It's like the wrong animal stepped into the room, and they can be genius in their audition, and you can still be like, well, they're just not the right person. We can't cast them. And that took a lot of my like self-hatred walking out of audition rooms out of the equation. Like, if you're really not the right person, you're not the right person.
Yeah, that is a relief to be on the other side of casting. It does. It's so easy to walk out of an audition. Like, if you think, like, if I do like, I'll get it, and you may not, and that's not because of you. I mean, it's not because of your talent, and that's really kind of a relief. Just a little bit of a relief, though. Just a little bit, but that's a little bit. Is
having
good.
empathy too for the actors coming in and knowing exactly how they're feeling and what they're going through.
Yes.
That must have been, a relief for them to know that you knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyone else? Any lessons, Carey? It's a big question.
Working with nice people generally breeds good results. And not that I've worked with very many non-nice people, but you do sometimes. But working with people that you love can make you feel empowered and comfortable to do things that you didn't think you could do. So I think seeking out good people.
Yes, we need that now in our lives. Luca has a great question. What are some of your daily routines as artists, whether as actors, writing process, or directing wise? And this could be in between projects or just things you do to keep your skills sharp, if you employ such tactics.
I don't have any. I have 2 children, so I do that most of the time. When I'm acting, the only real thing I do is when I'm doing a play, and I do a quite rigid, like, 3-hour thing before I go on stage, where I get in at 5, eat food, sleep from 5:30 till 6, have a shower, do my hair, do my makeup and not my hair.
This is on set at the theater. On stage.
And then in my dressing room, and then I go down on stage at 6:30 and I warm up for an hour, and then I go upstairs and do my hair and then put my costume on and I go down. So it's the only thing I ever do. I just rock up. And no, I'm kidding. But that's like my only thing.
Like ceremonial
basically,
stuff.
Are you saying I do just rock up? I need all my words.
Not at all.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
How about you two? Is there anything you do as actors that
I
just...
think she's being pretty cheeky about rocking up. Very well prepared.
Yes. I get that sense about her. She's very humble.
I think routines, I do think it's fun for each part to discover what that is. And I like it when the character tells me something that I can do for that particular job, and probably just so you feel like you're kind of learning or stretching, or so that is really a fun thing to engage with once you're going to go to work on something and incorporate either something new or some kind of routine or some kind of class or some kind of teacher or some kind of, I don't know what, otherwise I actually feel like fallow periods are really important too. It's probably what led me to making a film, so that, is
You work
good.
with acting teachers in between jobs?
Not often in between jobs, no. Usually for work. I think I did, some time ago, but just read. I like inspiration too, so like reading, people, whether it's anything to do with the arts. Really, it does not have to be about acting at all. So that's a nice way to just kind of keep a little flame burning.
Sure. Zoe?
I don't read entertainment news and I don't Google myself. Dead serious. It's the best thing that I can do for my brain. And I go to therapy.
Those are all excellent things. And before we wrap, obviously everyone in this room is aspiring to do something. Is there any, and I hate to ask the piece of advice question because there isn't one piece of advice, but is there something that you can tell people that works for you to just keep your motivation up? Because I think just being an artist is a hard life. Being an artist now is a hard life. Is there anything that you do on a daily basis to keep you excited and interested?
I have this little mantra that I always have on my mirror when I'm doing a job. And it's an excerpt from a Keir Hardie poem, but it just says, "These are our days. Walk them, fear nothing." Which always makes me feel lucky to be doing the job I'm doing and trying to embrace it rather than being afraid of it, and recognize that we're only here once. So that's a sort of helpful little mantra.
It is. It's hard to remember sometimes. How about you two?
No, I feel like I remember, and I just don't know how I just think you have to go through it, but I feel like you give so much of your self-esteem away, I think, as an actor. We can't tell you, probably all of us, but how many auditions, I've been on, and so I don't know how to not give the self-esteem away, but I think over time but it's really hard, and I think you have to, keep going.
Keep a healthy separation between the experience and your value as a person.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I feel like the best thing that I've learned as I went was to value my life. Like that when as a younger person, like, we're all ambitious and we all like have this deep burning desire to act. Otherwise we wouldn't do it because it's too fucking hard. And I think that when I was younger, I used to like put everything underneath acting. Like any job was more important than showing up to that wedding, or like, there was just some sense of like deep yearning and feeling like if I give it my all, it will give me something back. And eventually I realized that like, oh, my life is worth something like totally separate from my worth as an actor, and like being there for my family, being there for my friends is much more important than any job that I'll ever do. And valuing that has made me happier as a person. And that, I don't know, I think what Paul's saying about like giving something away, like you're not only giving away your self-esteem, you're giving away so much of your power as an actor all the time. You're always having to wait for a job, wait for someone to give you permission to do the thing you love. And it's horrible to wait for that permission. So I don't know, filling my life up with things that make me happy and people that I love has been, the best thing for me.
Thank you all for being here. You're very inspiring.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you.